Okay, so this is the Bible study for 2 Samuel chapter 3, verses 22 through 39. And the text says, "Just then David's men and Joab returned from a raid and brought with them a great deal of plunder. But Abner was no longer with David in Hebron because David had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the soldiers with him arrived, he was told that Abner, son of Ner, had come to the king and that the king had sent him away and that he had gone in peace. So Joab went to the king and said, 'What have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you let him go? Now he is gone. You know Abner, son of Ner. He came to deceive you and observe your movements and find out everything you are doing.' Joab then left David and sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern at Sirah. But David did not know it. Now, when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into an inner chamber, as if to speak with him privately, and there, to avenge the blood of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach, and he died. Later, when David heard about this, he said, 'I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May his blood fall on the head of Joab and on his whole family. May Joab's family never be without someone who has a running sore or leprosy, or who leans on a crutch, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks food.' Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the battle at Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and all the people with him, 'Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and walk in mourning in front of Abner.' King David himself walked behind the bier. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king wept aloud at Abner's tomb. All the people wept also. The king sang this lament for Abner. 'Should Abner have died as the lawless die? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. You fell as one falls before the wicked.' And all the people wept over him again. Then they all came and urged David to eat something while it was still day. But David took an oath, saying, 'May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I taste bread or anything else before the sun sets.' All the people took note and were pleased. Indeed, everything the king did pleased them. So on that day, all the people there and all Israel knew that the king had no part in the murder of Abner, son of Ner. Then the king said to his men, 'Do you not realize that a commander and a great man has fallen in Israel this day? And today, though I am anointed king, I am weak, and these sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds.'" Okay, so remember that you can download a PDF copy of our Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive. And so you can follow along with us as we study this text and ask and answer questions about it. So number one in our Bible study says, what happened in our last Bible study in 2 Samuel 3, 1 through 21? A, the house of Saul and the house of David were at war. That's true. B, Ishbosheth accused Abner of sleeping with his father's concubine. That's true. C, Abner was angry and threatened to deliver Israel to David while revealing to us that he knew that this was God's will and promise all along. That's true. Maybe that was the most significant revelation for us. Perhaps everybody knew that at the time, but we don't know in the story whether they knew that, whether for sure Abner knew that until now. So now we know that he set up Ishbosheth as king, knowing that that was not what God had planned or anointed. D, Abner began to make good on his threat to deliver all Israel to David. So that's what he did. He showed up at David's place, tried to make a deal with David. Now it seems like Ishbosheth was with him in that somehow or for some reason. Maybe Abner had sort of lied about what the purpose of the trip was, or um, convinced him that peace was the only option because he was going to get destroyed anyway. It's really hard to tell, but Ishbosheth was issuing commands based on David's demands, so he knew all this was happening. David met with Abner and sent him away in peace to finish the plan. And so that was true, and that's kind of where we enter the text for today. Number 2 says what happens now in 3:22 and 23. It says that just then David's men and Joab returned from a raid and brought with them a great deal of plunder, but Abner was no longer with David in Hebron because David had sent him away and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the soldiers with him arrived, he was told that Abner, son of Ner, had come to the king and that the king had sent him away and that he had gone in peace. So Joab and the men come back and they find out what's been going on in their absence, and that Abner's been there, that David had like a banquet with them, and then David sent him away in peace rather than capturing him or, killing him, which apparently was what Joab was interested in doing. So Joab returns and learns everything that's been going on, and apparently is not happy with it. So number 3 says, how did Joab respond to this? According to 3:24 and 25. A, he was fine with it. He had forgotten all about Abner killing his brother. And that is not right. That's not true. B, he went to David and asked, what have you done? And why did you let him go? And that's true. So and it doesn't even say that David really answered him. Maybe David did. Maybe David tried to explain what was going on. But I don't think Joab wanted to hear it. So we don't have any of that recorded. We just have Joab's sort of angry rant blowing up on the king, which just really tells you something about the relationship and the situation there, that he would be willing to come into the presence of the king and tell the king he did something wrong. I guess it's good to have people like that around you if they want your good, and they're willing to help you and support you, but also tell you you did something wrong and get you to correct it. It's not really good to have people around you who, as a leader, who have their own idea of what good is, and then tell you that you did something wrong when you didn't, when you might have done the right thing, and then they go take matters into their own hands anyway. And so I've had both, and sometimes the same people are just can be described the one way one time and the other way the other time. I find that as a leader, a lot of times people question what I've done, and sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong, and I hope that I can tell the difference. But most of the time they always think they're right, and so that's the challenge, right? They sometimes think that they're correcting the leader when they're really acting in their own self-interest. So it's a challenge for all of us, whether we're the leader or whether we're the one surrounding the leader, what it looks like to be a support, and how well do we discern actually the will of God and what is right or wrong when we're being that voice in the life of a leader. So anyway, it's interesting how Joab goes and yells at David and doesn't seem to think he did the right thing. C, he told David that Abner came to deceive him and observe his movements and find out what he is doing. That's the kind of guy Abner is. So basically, that's what Joab said. You know what kind of guy Abner is. You know him. He came to watch you. He's lying. He's pretending to be a person of peace. He's pretending to be on your team, and he's not even doing that. He's going to take all your he's going to tell Ishbosheth and the army and everybody that you're sending Joab out and that there are times when you're unprotected. So, there's, uh, given what we know about Abner from the last chapter or so, I don't think that Joab was wrong about that. Abner does seem to be kind of a shifty guy that it's hard to know if you can trust him, and he'll act in his self-interest and lie to you. That's what he's doing, it seems like, with Ishbosheth right now. So number 4 says, what did Joab do when he left David, according to 3:26 and 27? A, he sent messengers after Abner who brought him back. Yes. B, he took him into the inner chamber as if to speak with him privately. Yes. C, he stabbed him in the stomach to avenge the blood of his brother. Yes, all of that's true. Now, let me just say a couple of things about this. Clearly, David does not believe this is right. Joab has acted deceptively. He's acted without David's consent. He's killed a major leader in Israel, which was not the kind of thing David did. David didn't do that with Saul, who was God's anointed. And I know that Abner is a little different, but I think from a military perspective, not even necessarily just a righteousness and the law perspective, I think David sees this as underhanded and not right. That being said, in Jewish law, if somebody murders your family, you as a family member had the right to be the avenger of blood, it's called, and to go take their life in exchange. So that was actually part of Jewish law, and I think we talked about that a little bit in Exodus, just because if you had killed, we were talking about the law a little bit, if you had killed somebody and were innocent, or it was an accident or whatever, you could flee to a city of refuge, and in that city of refuge be protected from the avenger of blood, and of course then actually get a fair hearing before a judge. And if the judge decides that this was an accidental killing or something like that, then you can just live in the city of refuge and you'll be safe from the avenger of blood. But if not, then you can't seek sanctuary, and you'll get basically the death penalty. So they had that in Jewish law. I'm not really sure personally how that applied to somebody who was killed in battle. And I think what may be tricky here is that Jewish law governed Jews, and it wasn't really intended that Jews be fighting against each other, that Israel and Judah be fighting against each other. So in this case, I think that within the law, Joab would have been okay to be an avenger of blood, except for that if somebody's killed in battle, I think we all understand that being killed and killing somebody in battle is different from murder. You know, if Joab's brother was chasing Abner, what was his intent? His intent was to kill Abner. And Abner tried to call him off, and when he didn't go to the right or the left, that's when he killed him. He warned him. He didn't seem to want to kill him, but he knew it was either him or his foe, his opponent. And so I think that's the reason that we judge things in battle differently, is because battle is battle, and the intent is for right, for better or for worse, right or wrong. The intent is to hurt one another, to disable one another, often to kill one another in battle. And so whether or not that should have been avenged as a common murder, I think is a different question, and it's probably a complicated question, because I'm not sure that the law comprehended battling uh, between Jews. Um, so that's just a thought. So in some ways, David calls this murder, but in some ways, this is not the kind of murder that we think of, and we don't allow in America vigilante justice, and this is one of the reasons. We want the legal system to take care of that, and judge between two people and decide whether this is the right punishment or not, because you may have a situation where it's really hard to tell. And so I think um, I wanted to say all that because I want us to understand David didn't think this was right. And so when we read it, we don't think it's right. It like clearly just seems wrong or seems but I want us to understand sort of the balance of it, or both sides. David didn't think it was right because he seems to think that the other death was in battle, and that was part of the battle, and that this is underhanded and not the way. If Abner had died in battle, it would have been different. Instead of being lured into an inner chamber as if he was a friend and then killed, that just didn't seem right to David, and I think it doesn't set well with us either. But I say all the rest to say that how could an Israelite have justified this, right? How could somebody have thought this was okay, other than just they didn't care if it was okay because it was their brother, which is the way some people think. And I think the answer is that in Jewish law, there was a death penalty, and that was exacted by the family of the one who was killed. And so that would not have been quite as uncommon as we think it to be today. Just give us a little balance as we're looking at what happened here. Number 5, what did David do when he heard about this? According to 3:28 through 34, he declared himself and his kingdom innocent. This was not his doing or his plan. And that's what he did. He said, my kingdom and I are forever innocent. We didn't do this. This was not our intent. B, he declared a curse on Joab and his family. Yeah, I mean, he's gonna never have anybody without a running sore or leaning on a crutch or going without food. That's a pretty rough thing to wish or to curse, to lay on somebody's family. C, he declared a time of mourning and called on people to tear their clothes. He buried Abner in Hebron and wept aloud and sang a lament. Then all the people wept again, and that's what it tells us. By the way, the word that's in the translation that I read, bier, B-I-E-R, David walked behind it. That's not, a German beer. That is sort of a frame that they would put the casket on. So it was part of a funeral procession, is what it's talking about there. And I'm not sure exactly what that looked like. I imagine you could look it up and see something like that. Yeah, so just that's a side note. D, he fasted and refused to eat until the sun set. And so that was true. They tried to get him to eat while it's day, and he said, no, may God deal with me ever so severely if I don't eat, or if I eat before the sun sets. So what he's mourning and refusing to come out of mourning early, refusing to it may be that if this was an enemy, we don't mourn. And so people are like, well, the king, your enemy has been killed. We don't mourn. You need to eat and be strong. And he's saying, nope. I am mourning this. I won't shorten this time of mourning. This is mourning for a friend, for a countryman, for a great man. And so David behaves honorably and refuses to disrespect by cutting his mourning short. Number 6, what do we learn in 3:36 and 37? All the people took note and were pleased. So he did this against the advice, and a lot of this stuff is against the advice of the people around him. A lot of this is different from how everybody who was advising him would have behaved, or anybody perhaps who wished they were king or thought they should be in charge would have behaved. But it pleased everybody. And so when he behaved differently, everybody in the kingdom took note, and they were pleased. In fact, it says in B, everything the king did pleased them. In other words, this was kind of his pattern of behavior, and the fact that he behaved differently from most kings and from most people who were in leadership, even in their own kingdom, who maybe thought they should be in leadership, or who wanted to advise the king differently. They were happy that David behaved differently. David behaved honorably. David behaved humbly. David did things that people wouldn't expect, and that pleased the people. And part of what pleased the people was because he did this, everyone knew that David had no part in the murder of Abner. And perhaps if he had celebrated, or even just not fully mourned, they would have wondered, okay, maybe he had a part in this. But it was clear to them that he was innocent because of the way he responded to the death. And let me just say this, that in my experience, when we behave righteously, humbly, in a way that people do not expect, because other leaders don't behave that way, and maybe their own advisors and other godly people might be advising differently, but may not know fully what God is calling the leader to do. When you do that, when you behave differently, people do take note, and I have seen that kind of response. And I think that if you're in leadership, you ought to consider how David responded to these types of things. I'm not saying that David did everything right by any means. We talked about that last week and the week before, and there's some things that we'll talk about as we go along, that David is not the hero in that story or in that situation. But also there are things that when we look at David's character and how he led, we should be so honorable. We should be so humble, and pattern ourselves after him in those ways. Number 7, what did David say to his men in verses 38 and 39? A great commander and a great man has fallen in Israel today, and that's true. B, although he is anointed king, he, David, he is weak, and the sons of Zeruiah are too strong for him. So listen to him say that. And why does he say that? I mean, is that because he's weak like Ishbosheth was weak, and he was afraid of, Ishbosheth was afraid of Abner? Is David afraid of Joab and the sons of Zeruiah? And I think the answer is no. But I think David's statement is different from how we look at Ishbosheth and Abner. Abner was really in charge, and Ishbosheth was sort of a puppet put in place by Abner, whereas David really had the hearts of the people. And so he had the people behind him. And so I don't think the sons of Zeruiah could have taken the kingdom from him the way Abner could have, or probably was with Ishbosheth. However, David recognized in this moment that Joab had done something that was against his will. And that made David look weak. It meant in some ways he was weak because he didn't control that. He didn't stop it. He couldn't control that. And so I think this was a humble statement by David. Where I do think he had more control and authority over the kingdom than Ishbosheth had over his. And Joab was not as powerful as Abner was in the other kingdom, yet he recognized his weakness in this situation. And I think that's an attitude of humility that, just like I was saying before, that we should recognize and take on as a leader, because the truth is as strong as we want to present ourselves to be, or even want to be, the truth is there are some things we don't have control over. And we sort of lament that and are sad about that, because we wish we had control over everything. We'd like to think we had control over everything. We'd like everybody else to think we had control over everything. But then something happens that shows us we didn't have control over everything, and somebody else acting on their own behalf somehow was able to do something against our will and show their power. And that is humbling for us. Us admitting it and recognizing it is a good kind of humble. Number 8, what does David show us in the story about his leadership? A, he is honorable. He would have done he would have done this sort of thing. He forgave and showed mercy even to those who did not deserve it and treated him poorly. He would not have done this sort of thing. In other words, he would not have killed Abner. He forgave and showed mercy even to those who did not deserve it. That's how he had treated Saul. He treated Abner differently than Joab treated Abner. So we see that he's honorable. B, he is humble. He recognized that this had been done on his watch and that he had been unable to stop it. He begged for help from God. So that's what he says at the end of this in 38-39. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds. So in other words, he hasn't been able to keep things on track, at least in this area. And so he's asking for the help of God to take care of this situation. And these people that have become so powerful in his kingdom that they can do something that's against his will. C, the people responded to his leadership and took note when he did things they didn't expect and were unlike any other king they had seen. And that's true. And those are things we can learn from David. Number 9, how does your life and your action compare to David's? You know, in whatever context that you lead, whether it's in your family, in the church, at your workplace, in school, in sports, in extracurricular activities, how do you lead, and how do you compare to David in how you lead? This is a good reflection question, good thing to think about.